All right. How was that for everyone? That was a great intro. Welcome to a little info session on called the Love Principles, which it's right before Valentine's Day, so it's a perfect topic. But these love principles aren't maybe what you're thinking. These are things that will help you weather a storm, especially as a leader. If you're a leader of a family and organization, probably both for a lot of you. I'm Dr. Theresa Larson, and I'm going to be leading this conversation today with my colleagues who are amazing leaders in their industry and people I've gotten to know, human beings I've gotten to know, and who I look up to immensely. So this Buffalo conference, though, is something that the five of us are leading in July, actually July 21st. It's at the Glen Erie, this beautiful location in Colorado Springs. I live on the other side of the Rockies, depending on where you're looking, but in the Springs area, which is an easy place to get to. And we are actually, so the Buffalo Conference is this holistic approach to helping you as a leader and your team weather any storm that you're up against. If you look at it, the buffalo itself is an animal, a force to be reckoned with, that doesn't shy away from storms. It actually heads straight into it. And as a leader, we have to do that, right? In order to last, we have to do that. But we have to be able to lead ourselves first and take care of ourselves because our people respond off of us. And so there are big problems in today's day and age from what's going on, in the current climate politically, but also just burnout, retention, right? Retention issues, presenteeism issues, absenteeism issues, juggling work life and family life. If any of those things, if you're listening right now live on any of our platforms and this resonates with you as a leader, definitely just give it a thumbs up or say, hey, I get it. Because we want to interact with you on this too. This isn't just us talking at you. We'd love to hear back, but those are some big issues that we're dealing with now, that all of us are dealing with leading people. And here's the thing, like, we want, with this conference and kind of this little snippet of what we're doing today called the Love Principles, is we're giving you tools. We're giving you tools to help you lead yourself first so you can better help lead others. And why not, just imagine for a second, storm comes up, because they do. Either you're, and I've learned this from Jon, who I get to speak with often, is like, either you're going through a storm right now, you're about to go through one, or you've already gone through one, right? That's just going to happen in life. But what if we learn to be like the buffalo and just charge through it, but with gentleness and ease, and learning to love ourselves and leading others through it? And if you will, dance in the rain, dance in the storm, like, be okay with it. Be okay with the process of working through it versus trying to just sit it out or avoid. So what I want to do first, before we get into the topic of the love principles, because I know you're on your seats just waiting to hear what these are about, and I cannot wait to share them with you, is have each of the leaders here share a little bit about themselves. So I'll start with the other Dr. T, Travis Hearne. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. T. No, I'm just super stoked to be able to hang out with these four other amazing individuals and amazing leaders. So I'm Dr. Travis Hearne. I live on the other side of the mountain in Colorado Springs, and I was in the Marine Corps for 9 years, combat deployments back and forth from Iraq and Afghanistan, and really got a deep sense of love and passion for leading teams well, because I saw it save lives. I saw the other end of the coin where it potentially could have cost lives. So everywhere in that spectrum is something that where leaders, we can step in and we can make a huge difference in people's lives if we're doing it holistically in a holistically healthy way, which is why I love this group of people, because we're not that, like, yeah, it's great to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and eat nails for breakfast and read 17 books before you go to bed. But it's also, you have to be able to take care of yourself. And I want to be a little bit transparent here. We were talking about this before, and I wrote a book called Hybrid, and about hybrid work. And I want to show you a really deep aspect of hybrid work is my hybrid slippers. So this is what I wear during a lot of my sessions here. So I hope you enjoy this. We're gonna have a really good time. Dr. Teresa's she's awesome, and she's gonna really show us about these love principles, and we're gonna dig in and have a lot of fun. So with that, I want to pass it over to, let's see, Hollywood Squares. Let's go with Phillip.
All right. Hey guys, Phillip Koontz here. I was a former and am a former Navy SEAL of 6 years on SEAL Team 10, a couple combat deployments, and I'm a public speaker now. As far as leadership goes, I've been through some pretty messy leadership in my life. And unfortunately, some of that was in the SEAL teams as well too, and that really motivated me to go on and continue my education and getting my master's degree in leadership. So I'm not quite to the doctor level yet, guys. Sorry, I'm the JV team now, but master's in leadership, really passionate about it. I look across the world and just kind of scan the horizon now for good leaders that are out there. And there's not a whole lot that rise to the surface. And I think that leadership is a buzzword now, but not a lot of people really understand what it means. So one of the concepts that I talk about is leading in, out, and up. Leading ourselves well, leading well within a team, and then how do you influence those who directly report to you, and then how do you lead up and influencing the people that you report to. So excited to be on this journey as well too. I live out here in Monument, Colorado with my wife and yes, 5 kids. I've got a little fire team of kids. And life is great. It's busy. We're drinking through a fire hose every day. But that's, just a little bit about me. Excited to be here talking about the love principles today, and happy Valentine's Day to everybody that's joining us right now. I'll kick things off to take it away, Jon.
Yeah, thanks, Phillip. Hey, I'm Jon Macaskill. I too am a retired or former Navy SEAL, but I am retired. I live just down the road from Phillip, also in Monument. I guess technically I'm in Colorado Springs, so we've got like the Colorado Springs gang here, and then we've got the gang that's a little further west. So anyhow, I was in the SEAL teams for 17 of my 24 years in the Navy, and I also saw positive and negative examples of leadership, and I've learned from both sides of that. From the negative sides, I've learned what not to do. From the positive sides, I've learned what to do, and I've put that all in my leadership tool bag, and I'm excited to be sharing some of those lessons with you today, especially with that love principle with Valentine's Day tomorrow. So that's a little bit about me, and I will turn it over to Laura, our new addition to the team. Very excited to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Jon, and I'm so honored to be here with all of you today. So my name is Laura Jones, and I'm the founder and CEO of Be a Legend. It's a company that I actually started quite a few years ago now, when I first emigrated from the UK to the US with nothing but a laptop and my brain. And my entire career has involved helping companies grow. I've obviously led teams throughout that, but I've built businesses for over 20 years, from startups to tens of multiple millions of dollars, and over in the UK and over in the US. And I decided that huge leap and prove that the American dream is alive, and prove, to many, many others that if you have the self-belief and you take the action, that anything is possible. Many of you, may know my background, may know my story, but I lost my son back in 2021 and nearly my life. And through that, I definitely am excited to talk about leading with the love principles through the storm, as I have lived and breathed that. So obviously my background is also in psychology, and I have multiple degrees in psychology and mental health counseling, and I am a neuroscience coach. So well, thank you so much, guys, for having me today. So back over to you, Dr. T.
All right, thank you. This is quite the lineup. And so I'll briefly introduce myself, but through the love principles, you'll get to know me more. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I am a wife. I've got 2 little boys that keep me, life is very full here. So I am the founder and president of Movement RX, which is a company where we give people the knowledge and tools to live a lifetime of emotional and physical freedom. So we do government contracting and run retreats and give virtual experiences to individuals. And now more and more, even working with leaders of companies to help their company be healthier in general, right? Because if you're putting your people first, taking care of your people is something that a lot of leaders don't know how to do. And so we provide them the tools to do that. And yet in all of this, I've had to learn to do that myself first. And I am actually a former Marine officer, engineer officer. I ran a platoon in Iraq, did a bunch of deployments, but one overseas and then a bunch domestically. But all the while, and this kind of leads into what we're talking about today, is, and something I had a very hard time talking about for a while because I was very embarrassed, was that I always looked the part as a Marine, acted the part, pro athlete, Division I athlete, and yet I had an eating disorder. And I was struggling every day internally and fighting this battle that I didn't want anyone else to see and that I was super embarrassed about. But I had to perform and look the part and be the part. And I ended up hitting rock bottom. And right, that was deployed as a Marine and had to ask for help to people that didn't understand and to include myself. So that journey back was a difficult one. And those things that haunted me then, even haunted me as a business owner. And so I've had to learn, through therapy and through a lot of other things like mindfulness and meditation, which has been groundbreaking for me, and in my movement practice, how to take care of myself. And so there's this thing, the therapist I work with, a common thing was like, you need to learn to love yourself, right? If you're going to therapy, and I totally advocate for therapy, right, guys and ladies, this is important. You need to learn to love yourself. And I used to say, well, what the hell does that mean? Like, hug myself more, you know, give myself a little back rub. Like, what is that? And I found that that was something hard for therapists to actually give me actionable things to do. Now, breath work was one, which is super powerful. We're going to go into that today. But I decided, okay, the love principles, like these are things that I learned over the course of healing. And I'm still on the wellness journey, right? We've never actually arrived. It's a constant daily journey. These love principles have been tried and true in my life. And I came up with them when 5 weeks after giving birth to my first son, I was asked to do a TED Talk. And it was like, boom, I wanted to talk about what it was like to be what it took to be a warrior. And I had to memorize it. And the way to memorize it was through an acronym. And there you have it, the love principles. And so it was wonderful to present, yet I was still in the frog of baby. So, probably I haven't looked back at that speech in a while, but it's probably a bit foggy. But today it's not. Today it's very clear. And it's been very clear for me the past 5 years of growing a family and a business and working with these individuals. So without further ado, I want to jump right into it because I want to bring up these principles, and I also want to ask this panel of amazing speakers and leaders here about their journey with the principles. So the principles laid out.
Let the love begin. Let the love begin.
So basically, okay, LOVE, right? The first one is lead you first. Lead, right? Lead you first. This is a concept I learned the hard way. Is in order to effectively take care of my Marines or anyone else, my family, my sons, my husband, and my company, I have to learn to lead myself first. And that was a light bulb moment for me, realizing this. Like, no one else is going to do that. Yeah, I mean, my family loves me, but I'm responsible for me. Right? I got to be the one to forgive. I got to be the one to stop blaming and shaming, because ultimately that's a direct mirror of myself. And so I learned this concept the hard way, but thankfully I learned it. And so I want to ask Jon, or I'm sorry, they take that back. I got so wrapped up in the flow. I meant the other Dr. T. I want to ask the other Dr. T. Okay, when did you learn this on your leadership journey?
My goodness. So, I mean, a lot like you, being deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan and all those crazy places, it was very much mission first. It was you take care of the mission, you take it. We called it. I talked about this last time. You got horse, gun, cowboy, and that was the order in which you took care of yourself. Took care of things. It was you took care of your vehicle, you took care of your weapon, and then you took care of yourself. So that was kind of beat into me the entire time in the Marine Corps. It was like you need to make sure that you're getting the mission accomplished and things are getting done. As I kind of transition into the corporate space and into the civilian world, and I walk through my doctoral journey, my doctorate's in organizational change and leadership. So what we did, we basically geeked out for 4 years on organizational change and leadership theory, and I latched onto this idea, this transformational leadership theory, where you have different tenets, and we can a couple of sessions down the road we'll dive deeply into that. But one of those is called individual considerations. One of the tenets that you really go through is called individual consideration, and how are you individually considering your people? And it really it beat to death the concept of, and I loved it, it beat to death in a good way, if that matches, but it is, you have to be able to individually consider each of the people that work for you or around you in order to pull out the very best in them, and in order to pull out the very best, and in turn pull out the very best in your organization, your team. So it's really down to the cellular individual level. And I started thinking through it, and I was like, okay, that's great, but the leader is still supposed to be pulling those out of those other people. But what about them? What about themselves? How do they put a mirror up and individually consider themselves and what they need? And for me, it was like, man, okay, if I'm going to start talking about these things and leading my teams really, really well, I need to come from a place of health and holistic wellness where I am able to practice what I preach. And going back to being on the cellular level of things, like if I'm not, in a very practical way, if I'm not taking PTO and taking care of myself, how does that give my people permission to do the same? If I'm not taking time off when I really need to, if I'm not digging into my mental health, if I'm not, spending time with my family, how does that give them permission to do the same? And that all those things that are filling, and they refill your cup, and those are things that make us holistically healthy leaders. Those are things that really drive us. When we are filled up and we are taking care of ourselves, we take care of our people better, and in the best way possible. So I found that as a leader, as I've been leading teams in corporate America and kind of in the coaching realm and in consulting realm, is that like leaders find themselves in the worst spots when they're at their rock bottom, when they're on empty. So what I do when I talk to some of these leaders, these executives, is like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What are you doing to fill your cup? How are you going to get the energy to be able to bring your organization, to bring your team up to speed with where you would like them to be? What are your goals for not only the business, but what are your goals for yourself? What are your goals for your health? How are you taking care of yourself? So it really, when I started peeling back the onion of like what poor performance was, what trying to think, the Great Resignation. Why are people leaving jobs? It's because of there's leadership that's not allowing the individual consideration that needs to be done in order to effectively build a team, and that starts with the leader taking care of themselves. So I saw that. And I saw that once leaders started taking care of themselves and really flipping the switch and prioritizing health, their teams got healthier. They got healthier. Their organizations were more successful. They started making more money. Those are the tangible things that taking care of yourself as a leader will actively get you. And I saw that firsthand, and it was a repeatable format. As a nerd doctor, the repeatable stuff is what makes sense to me. And like, if it's repeatable and it's practical, then it's a great practice. So that's kind of how I look at that.
Well, wouldn't you, so as Marines, wouldn't that have been nice to learn too, as young Marines? Because that's also another skill. I remember on our last call together was like, man, just this concept of self-care. Because mission first, it's like, your people, troop welfare, and mission accomplishment. Really, nothing in there was about, well, you're part of that troop, and what are you doing to keep yourself healthy? Like those are, it seems like, okay, obviously now, but then, imagine what we could do with young athletes, young military members, young people in corporate America looking to be executives now. Burnout is a real thing. And, we're going to lead into the next thing here soon, oxygen, but well, I just gave it away. Breathe, everyone. Just take a breath. I just watched the movie Soul again. And Soul is a great Disney movie if you haven't seen it, but it was about finding that spark. And I feel like a lot of leaders have lost the spark, why they do what they do, and like the zest for life. It's clear because we bring leaders to our retreats that we run, and it's like, I've lost the colors, I've lost the zest. We got to find out that's like the beauty of life, right? And so yeah, go ahead.
Also, when we think about this and we think about generational employment, we have new generations coming in, and these concepts are slowly but surely being more accepted in the workplace. The take care of yourself, the remote work, the kind of the increase of hybrid and remote work, all these things where the new generation of work is really wanting these things, and they're pushing for these things. So if we are able to prioritize those, and we are going to start to slow down a lot of those negative things that we're starting to see in the workplace, as far as Great Resignation, quiet quitting, all these buzzwords that have popped up over the past year. So if we can really start to try to bridge the gap between what the new generation of employees are wanting and what executives and leaders are able to provide, we can, I mean, it could be a whole new generation of amazingly happy and productive humans, which is what I would really love.
Yep. Well, that's what that is essentially why we all came together too, is because we believe that. We believe this. And that leads me to the next actionable thing. These love principles are very actionable, right? Like lead you first. Like, what does that look like for you? What is it going to take for you? But oxygen, right? The concept of oxygen may seem like, well, obviously we breathe, thank goodness. It's an involuntary thing that we do, but like, what is the benefit of oxygen? And for me, in therapy and kind of creating these love principles, well, we take 20 to 24,000 breaths a day, depending on your respiratory rate, right? And that's a lot of breaths, everyone. When you think about it, and how can we optimize those breaths and get more focus in? I mean, well, get more focus, get more quality oxygen in, more quality breaths, which help improve focus. And what I've learned, I dumb it, not dumb it down, but I keep it real brief. Like, breath is like the remote control between the brain and body. And I now have had the chance to work with Jon Macaskill, retired Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness meditation coach, who literally teaches breath work for a living and all the benefits in really cool ways. And so I want to kick it over to him as to how this breath work has been instrumental in your leadership, both at home and at work, because you obviously do it with your kids too. I know this is a special secret.
I'm glad you highlighted that piece too, because being a leader is not just in the office. You are a leader through and through, no matter where you are. And if you are in fact a leader, it carries over into the family and then vice versa. And obviously, as you mentioned, as a mindfulness and meditation teacher, this topic is near and dear to my heart. And as you also have mentioned already, the physiology is there, right? So what's happening is when we breathe, specifically when we breathe intentionally, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's what's going to help us to calm down, bring us down from the red down into the green, so that we're more focused. There's actually more blood in our brain, so that we're paying more attention, and so that we make better, more rational, more cognitive decisions. And so that's a quick down and dirty of why the oxygen is important. Now, digging further into that, you're going to be more grounded and focused as a leader. So yes, you can make those better decisions, but you can lead better. We want leaders who are grounded, right? If the stuff hits the fan, we don't want a leader to fly off the handle because they can't handle it. So stopping and pausing and taking a few breaths, literally doing that, can actually allow you to be more grounded. It can allow you to be more focused so that you can be more productive and efficient and proficient in the work that you're doing. I always talk about this, Theresa, and you know that I do, is that I hear quite often that people they say, I don't have enough time to breathe. I don't have enough time to do these breathing exercises. Well, if that's the case, I actually encourage you to do it more so, because as you do these, you're going to be more productive, more efficient and proficient, and you're going to end up making some time in your day. What normally takes you 8 hours, you may get done in 6. So then you can go and do some self-care. You can do that L, right? Leading yourself first and taking care of yourself. So really, that oxygen piece, it really helps you to get focused, get grounded, really helps you to make more time. You're going to be more creative as well. As we tap into that parasympathetic nervous system, we actually start tapping into the right hemisphere of our brain more often. And as you tap into that, you start thinking more creatively. It's not just facts and figures that you see, which so many of us in the leadership realm, quote unquote, live in, is facts, figures, black and white, objective. Well, a lot of the time we need to have creative sides to us. We need to have creative solutions. We need to be able to see things that others don't as leaders. Maybe in Phillip's and my line of work, and Theresa's, Travis's, yours prior, when we were on the battlefield, we had to see creative solutions. And Laura, I know you see creative solutions all the time. So we have to be able to tap into that creative side of our brain as well. And then finally, as you do that, as you're more creative, as you're more focused, as you're more grounded, you're also going to be more emotionally intelligent. And as you are more emotionally intelligent, you're going to automatically, by default, be a better leader. You're going to see what your people need. You're going to understand their needs, their desires, their ideals, values, goals. And then you're going to be able to remove obstacles and serve them so that they can do their job better. Because when it really boils down to it, we may be leaders and we may be on top of the organizational task org chart, but really we're servants. Our job is to remove obstacles so that our people can do the jobs that they need to do better, faster, more efficiently, more proficiently, more creatively. So as we see more clearly with more emotional intelligence, we're going to be a better leader. So that's just a few examples of why oxygen, literally breathing differently, is going to help you to be a better leader.
Yeah, thank you, Jon. And I've gotten to hear your story and, where mindfulness and meditation and breath work has influenced you, and seen you work with leaders in that space. And I, from a scientist perspective, I've, breath work is kind of the concept of just breathe. Didn't work for me initially. It doesn't work for me now either, because I like to go into the science of it to help people understand. There's so much power in it. It's like your own biofeedback, if you will, if you really pay attention. And a lot of the pain research points to the fact that if you can do breath work each day, it can reduce your chronic pain by 57 to 90%. That's a big range, and that goes from beginner to advanced breather, if you will. Thankfully, we're all breathers, but you can be more effective at it. And just a real quick tidbit on effectiveness, just close your eyes for a moment right now and take a couple deep breaths and pay attention to your shoulders. Do your shoulders go up towards your ears, or does your belly and chest go out? We call it horizontal, or does everything go vertical? And, pay attention to that for a couple of breaths. And ideally, what we want to do is breathe more horizontally. Think of like a belt. You're wearing a belt. You want to breathe more into that belt or corset versus into our ears. And so, but there's so many tactics with the way we teach. And you can open your eyes now, everyone, if you like. I want to make we're here. We're still here. Everyone's getting zened out. This is great. But there's so many different ways to teach breath that's super effective that you will go back to this Buffalo conference, you will be learning, because it's a key tool and tactic in learning to love yourself. And it helps you slow down and pay more attention, which that gives you the spark back in life. That is literally what it can do. So don't just breathe, everyone. Just pay attention to what that breath gives you.
Theresa, can I say something?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay. Go ahead, Phillip.
No, I was just going to say too, with breathing. About 7 years ago, I went to see a psychologist at the VA, and he was talking to me a lot about this breath work. And he said, this is not something that you're just going to be able to pick up automatically, because we're going to get throughout our day and get distracted. So I'm a pretty practical guy, as I know we all are. I actually had to set a timer on my phone and on my watch. So every hour I practice breathing the way that he was telling me to. And he likened it to a light switch. He said, when we are stressed out, that light switch is on, that cortisol is running through our bodies. And when we learn how to breathe properly, it taps in, like Jon said, it taps into that parasympathetic, and it releases a lot of those feel-good emotions, the oxytocin and the dopamine, the serotonin, and it flips that light switch off. And it was fascinating to me to see that as I was developing the muscle memory and learning how to breathe properly, that I was actually getting a lot less stressed out throughout the day. And I was like, wow, this stuff really works. So I've been a big believer of it, and I'm really glad to see that I'm a part of a team of experts that learn that know how to breathe. So. Yeah.
And one thing I just wanted to add too, Dr. T, just before, if you guys are talking about or toying about the Buffalo Leadership Conference, these are the kind of things, these practical exercises that we are going through, and these really practical leadership techniques are things that you're going to learn firsthand from Dr. T and from Jon. And so this isn't just something that we're going to talk about here and forget. These are things that if you come, we're going to make you breathe. and it's going to be high elevation. So you're going to learn how that works really, really well. So look
And
forward
if
to
not,
that.
you'll pass out.
Yeah, so
Well,
look
they can
forward to that, and
breathe.
just know that these are things that we truly believe in, and like that we're going to show you at this conference. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in and add something as well, that the like the oxygen part of this conversation, it literally, the breathing saved my life. And when I learned how to breathe and slow my breathing down, and I'm not kidding, it actually saved my life. I was seconds from flatlining, and because I did that, it slowed my heart rate down, which meant that otherwise I was just going to die quicker. So it literally can save your life, and it's an incredible tool and skill to have. And just like all of you guys have said today, that you learn to breathe and find that time and make the time. Actually, you actually set a timer, just like you said, Philip. Put it in your calendar, but you make that time to practice. You do that even 5 minutes a day. It's incredible the difference that will make, in even a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So yeah, it resonates
Thank
strongly
you,
with that.
Laura. Yeah, you're right, and it can save a life. It saved your life. It's human performance coaches who literally that's all I do is teach breathing have helped. It helps with panic attacks. It helps with learning to respond versus react to even just the simplest things like before you send a text, even though now you can edit them, right? I learned this from some of you in this group, but you be thoughtful about it, right? It crosses the gamut, the spectrum, but it is life. Breath is life, and if we can optimize it in our favor and train it. Like we can train it. We're going to train it at this conference. No, we're not going to do cold plunges necessarily, but something maybe a little similar. We're gonna expose ourselves to training this thing that can help us save us in how we respond versus react with our family first, ourselves, our family first, and our people. But that leads me to the next topic, which is super important too, is this concept of vulnerability, which I used to think was like, well, why would I want to be vulnerable? Because that's clearly showing weakness, of course, in my, snake brain or lizard brain part of me. Maybe that's what it was telling me, but that's not true. I've learned a ton about vulnerability because one, I had a disorder that was, basically slowly killing my spark in life. And so this vulnerability concept is something, I mean, obviously in therapy, you know, it, it helps to be vulnerable, especially if you want to get better. But I found that being vulnerable with my team, with my husband, even with my children now, I share when I am struggling because I want them to know, when it's not their fault, but this is what mommy's going through, or even with my team, like, hey, I need a mental health day. Um, I want them to know that. But I've read a lot about vulnerability, obviously from Brene Brown, and who's an amazing educator in that space. And I want to read a quote by her, and then I want to kick it over to Philip to talk about how vulnerability has played a role in his leadership style and who he is. But let me first read this quote by Daring Greatly, the book, which I highly recommend reading. Nice, great read on the side. So Brene Brown mentions vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is a source of hope, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper or more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. It is the core of all emotions and feelings. And we had a leader recently we worked with who said he has a hard time with feelings, but this work, these tools of oxygen, breath work, mindfulness, meditation, movement has really helped him open up. Now he's doing this with his team. Anyway, Philip, you've been a leader for a very long time, and vulnerability is really important to you. And why is it so important to you?
Well, let me just say I'm not a vulnerability ninja quite yet. I'm getting there. But vulnerability, I'm just going to be honest, it sucks. It sucks, and it's hard, and it's messy. And with me, with my kids, the first thing that comes to my mind is I've got to be brutally honest with myself first, and then with my family. If I want to model vulnerability as leaders, we have to model the actions and the behaviors that we want to see in others. And so I have to say, you know what? I messed that up. Four most powerful words a leader can say is, I messed that up, and taking responsibility for that. And I'm not able to do that if I'm not first vulnerable enough to recognize when I mess up instead of finger pointing at everybody else or blaming other situations. So I apologize to my kids. I'm like, guys, that was not. I raised my voice. I lost my temper. That's not who Dad wants to be. That's not who Dad is becoming. That's not the dad that I want to be. Will you forgive me? And I apologize to them. And for my wife, Susanna, she is an anchor. She's definitely a part of my pack. And I'll just highlight this with a real life example that literally just happened 4 days ago. I had the worst day for probably the last year since I can remember. I had the worst day ever, and I found myself really struggling with vulnerability. It happened I got triggered mentally, physically. I mean, this hung in this. It affected me for at least 2 to 3 days as I'm processing this and going through, why did this happen and how can I prevent this from happening again? Not to get into the messy details, but we'll just say it was the VA and some of the lack of care that I had been getting, that they said that I no longer needed. And I felt very alone. I felt trapped. I told my wife, I felt like I was in a small room with the walls slowly kind of caving in on me. And I was having a hard time breathing, all of that. And I'm going to tell you, in the moment, so if you would have come up to me, Theresa, just that day on the street, or we would have seen each other at the gym and you would have been like, hey, Phillip, how you doing? I would have been completely open and honest with you and be like, I'm having a crappy day right now. And here's why. Because I don't want to just be like that guy that's like, oh, I'm good. How are you? Oh, I'm good. Right. I'd be like, I learned that in the SEAL teams. Right, John? Like, I don't think there's ever been one guy that I ever went up to and I was like, hey, man, how you doing? Not one time he was like, I'm a soup sandwich right now, or I'm a train wreck. Right. And so I carried that mentality into my civilian life, where I just started telling everybody that I was good. So I'm really trying to not do that. So if I came up to you, Theresa, I'd be like, I'm having a bad day. However, I did not want to pick up the phone and reach out to the group of people that I have already in place. I call them my pack, the 4 or 5 people that you have in your life that you can be intimate with, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can be very transparent with, that can help hold you accountable as well too. I didn't want to pick up the phone. And I knew that was probably the best thing to do, but I started to find myself reverting back into my shell. I'm like a turtle. I tuck my head, my arms and legs into my shell. I just tell everybody I'm good. I isolate myself. And that vulnerability piece was really hard. And without stretching myself, I eventually the next day I did force myself to pick up the phone and to be very vulnerable, to reach out to my support network for help. But without that, it's so easy. It's so easy to get in your head, to let those negative tapes play again, to let it to affect you mentally and emotionally and physically as well too. I mean, I was very lethargic, very unmotivated, and it was kind of scary, the place that I went to so fast without being intentional with some of the things and the practices that we'll talk about during the conference. What are some really practical tools that you can walk yourself through to help maybe some of you begin that journey of vulnerability, or just to work towards becoming that vulnerable ninja, where it just is like breathing. It's second nature for you. So it was something that I had to kind of pull myself out of. And it's good to talk about vulnerability for ourselves, but then as leaders, like Travis had mentioned earlier, it's really important for us to be able to know how to create safe places and spaces for those that we lead who are dealing with messy and very raw emotions as well too. Because if you yourself don't know who you are, if you yourself are uncomfortable with your own messy emotions and you're not vulnerable and don't have that support network, then you're not going to know how to help other people either. You're going to be finding the quickest way out of that conversation, because it's going to make you feel really uncomfortable when you come face to face with someone else's very raw, messy emotions sometimes. And speaking of Brene Brown, I think one of my favorite analogies of this, I think if you really want to get to the next level of vulnerability, really work on empathy. Work on empathy. And my definition of empathy is simply just identifying the emotion within someone and connecting with it. Identifying the emotion within someone and connecting with that emotion. So Brene Brown, she uses the analogy. So you're walking through the woods, and you look down. You notice this big, huge, deep hole in the ground, and so you walk up to the hole. You're like, "What the heck is this doing?" You look down, and there's a person that's down there, right? And you're like, "Hey, how you doing? Like, how'd you get down there?" Well, sympathy. This is sympathy versus empathy. Sympathy says, "Hey, sorry you're down there. I'll be praying for you, or sorry you're down there. It must be rough." And then you just kind of walk along, through the path of the woods. But empathy is where you get that ladder out and you crawl down in the hole with them and you just sit with them. You don't try to pick them up on your back, right, and carry them out of the hole because that's enabling them, right? You don't want to do the work for the person. You just want to sit with them, identify the emotion that they're expressing, that they're feeling, those raw, messy, vulnerable emotions, those deep emotions, and just really do your best to connect with them and just sit with them in the midst of that. So if you want to help others create that safe place and that safe space of vulnerability in your workplace, really work on developing the tool of empathy in your own life, and that'll help you be able to create that safe place for others as well too.
Well, Phillip, thank you for sharing that. Well, one, just by you being vulnerable here, uh, you know, is really helpful for me, leading with you. And then I can guarantee you everyone listening, because that's the one thing I've read about vulnerable when a CEO or an executive can be vulnerable with their team. It allows their team to then open up about what's going on with them and share their struggles. So it's just like the physical stuff, right? If we, just the concept of self-care, like lead you first, if we start to do that by doing, you just showed what that looked like. It's like just sharing the fact that it took you a few days. Yeah, I've been there too, like in my own life. And and when you share it with another empathetic human, which leaders could all use more empathy, right? It doesn't, that shame dies. Whatever shame you have with it dies. And actually that's how Brene Brown teaches it, is when you share with an empathetic ear, your shame goes to die, which is what sometimes we need. And leaders, we take on so much in our lives too. We are good at helping others. We are good at, I like Gretchen Evans, one of our panelist speakers, which I'm just going to say that out loud because we're so excited to have her. She calls it a rope team, right? Who's your rope team? You just shared that. Like, you got your rope team. So I'm going to ask you all listening, who's your rope team? Who are those people that you can call and they will just listen and be there with you? And ideally, you as a leader need to be that for your people, whether not to be enabling, right, but to be a resource, to be a loving ear, to be empathetic to your people. And as we were talking about with Laura earlier, it's connecting and being connecting with others and getting to know them, what makes them tick, right? That's what will create retention in your business, right? So but Phillip, thank you for being vulnerable about what you just did.
There's a lot of freedom that comes from being vulnerable too, isn't there? Like, I know in the SEAL teams, and you mentioned this too, it's almost like a bad word, it's like, oh, being vulnerable, it's like that's a weakness. And I think it's not to dog the SEAL teams at all. It's just that I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what being vulnerable really looked like. But as I've started that journey and as I'm progressing on that journey, there's so much authenticity, which is what Brene Brown says. Love that. There's so much authenticity. They're like, wow, I can connect with that person. Like, the leader that I'm following, like, they're a real human being. They mess up. They have bad days. They have these raw emotions as well sometimes. And so the authenticity that is birthed out of our vulnerability is huge. And then the freedom that comes from that, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to have a facade or pretend like I'm someone who I'm not. And guess what? I've got bad days too. That freedom, that emotional and mental freedom that comes it was a big weight that was lifted off my shoulders when I was finally able to come to terms with it's okay to not be okay, and give myself that permission to be vulnerable and to have bad days.
Well, thank you, Phillip, for that. And that like sums up vulnerability. So we've got lead you first, oxygen, vulnerability, and that leads us to the last principle, which is elasticity. Now, elasticity, when you practice vulnerability and you practice this breath work, and all the different tactics of, learning to breathe more optimally and put yourself, it's not selfish. It creates this elastic response. And so elasticity is our final principle, which essentially means change. And we've got neuroplasticity, which maybe many of you have heard of. I'll just give you the definition of neuroplasticity. It's the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections after injuries. Injuries could be an emotional, right? Emotional or physical or both. They usually are both. Usually physical injuries comes with an emotional aspect, and emotional injuries comes with a physical aspect. The two very much go together. But the idea that there can be change, I think, is powerful, because I definitely, and I know all of the 5 of us here can relate to the fact that some of the thoughts we've had have been pretty scary, and things we've been through have been pretty scary. And to think that that is our life, or that injury that we experience, that emotional or physical, is that's it. This is the way I'm going to think the rest of my life. I have to battle this. Then to know that there can be a change, the way we think about ourselves, the way our brain responds, our body responds, is a huge thing. And that was very powerful for me to learn in PT school, but then also just all in my mindfulness training and the things I've learned from you guys. So I actually want to kick it over to Laura now, because she is an amazing story and has been through a lot. And I just want to know how this knowledge of change, the ability to change brain and body with all of the hardship you've been through, has helped you as a leader.
Well, thank you so much. I cannot tell you that if I didn't know about elasticity and understanding how the brain works, I may not be able to do what I've been doing today. Because quite frankly, all of us will experience trauma at some point in our life. Whether you're a leader or you're not a leader, most of us will experience some type of trauma at some point, whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace. And just with my personal story, obviously I went through severe trauma in my personal life, and at the same time, I'm still a leader and I have a company, and I have to lead my employees and my team. And that was a huge challenge at the time, because my focus was just on my grief and my trauma, and how am I possibly going to get through this adversity and this huge storm, right? This huge storm. And so I'm lucky in the sense that because of my education and my background and understanding how the brain works and understanding about psychology and the neuroscience behind why we do what we do, that actually helped me immensely. Because 4 months after losing my son and needing my life, I said to myself, okay, I have a choice. And I said, I can either spiral, or I can, use this trauma and grief as my fuel. Now, how am I going to do that, right? It's all well and good saying, okay, that's what I'm going to do. But now it's how. What are the tools? How am I going to do this? And it's really, elasticity is about connecting the unconnected. And there have been so many studies on this that have proven that if you apply the tools, and by the way, this is something that we'll teach, in the conference, but if you apply the tools to allow your brain to be trained in a way that you want to think and you want to lead, it will start to become what we call an unconscious bias. So it's no longer just something that you have to be practicing every single day and be very vigilant about it. It now starts becoming part of you and who you are, and you don't even need to think twice about doing what you're doing, because your brain has been rewired essentially. So the neural pathways have changed. And so And again, like I said, there have been studies on this. But as someone talking to you right now, I can tell you that that is absolutely the case. And I've got multiple evidence of that, not just because of what I've gone through and applying it in a leadership role, but also as an athlete. I train with elite athletes, and I'll give you a brief example. I had some trauma from doing these box jumps on a 24-inch box jump. It's a couple of feet. And for those of you that don't know, I'm only 5'3", right? So I'm very, very short. And I had some trauma when I was jumping on this box where I basically screwed up and completely smashed my shin in, to the point it was really bad, and it was in tremendous pain for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and it traumatized me. Well, not that long ago, as part of our session, that was a requirement. We needed to be doing our 24-inch box jumps. And I said to myself, I knew exactly what was going on. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. It was the fact that my brain was trying to protect me because of the trauma I had been through. And you can apply this to anything in life. I'm just giving you an example of the fitness side right now. But my brain was essentially doing its job. It was trying to protect me. But how does it know that I can do something if I don't give it the information to teach it that, hey, actually, that was in the past, this is now. And so in order to rewire the brain and change, like what I was saying about the connecting the unconnected, you have to feed your brain new information. So I knew that I had to show my brain that, hey, I can jump on this 24-inch box and I'm not going to injure myself and everything's going to be okay. Now, there comes a fear, right? So now fear is now starting to creep in. And that's all related to the trauma. Now, what do you do when you're facing that fear and your brain again is kicking in and saying, no, you're not going to be doing this because you're going to have the same problem that you had prior. Well, that's when you have to say to yourself, you know what, you got to face this fear. And I'm going back to the story where I, lost my son and nearly lost my life in respect to how do you take that trauma and that grief? And every time you feel it bite you, you just bite back harder. You're that buffalo. You just head straight into the storm and you say, you know what? I've got this. Because otherwise, again, you're just stuck in that rut and you cannot push past. You cannot get through that adversity. And so now going back to the box jump again, I did do it, and it took a lot of courage to be able to make that jump because, again, I'm facing that fear. But the moment I did it the first time and I realized, oh, I didn't fall, I didn't smash my shin in, my brain now has some information to say, you can do this. But I will tell you this, I didn't just immediately go and jump on it. I did it in stages. And I actually drew something out I wanted to share with you. And I think this will resonate with a lot of people. But when we are stuck in our comfort zone, so I don't know if you can see this, but when we're stuck in our comfort zone, hang on, the camera's going backwards here. There we go. When we're stuck in our comfort zone, when we want to come all the way out to here, it's very, very scary. And essentially that is what my brain was telling me, that, wait a minute, you want to go from here to here and you had major trauma? There's no way you're going to be able to do that. So how do I get my brain to come on board, to not be so fearful? You have to do it in stages. So I got a plate, and put it on top, like a weight, put it on top of the box. And it was only maybe an inch higher than the 20-inch that I was already jumping on. Jumped on that, brand new. Okay, I can do that. So then I put another one on and then another one on, and you gradually do it. And my point coming back to here is when you're in your comfort zone and you want to be all the way out here, do it in stages. Because what happens, this is part of elasticity. Imagine this is an elastic band, right? Hang on, here we go. Imagine this is the elastic band. Sorry guys, I'm having to do this backwards because the camera's reversed on me. But imagine this is an elastic band circling the comfort zone. And I now want to stretch it a little bit just to come out here. Well, you try getting an elastic band and you just stretch it a little bit. What happens? It bounces back, right, to the comfort zone, but now it's slightly wider. So what's happened is the information that you fed your brain just by doing it in little increments, you've now expanded your comfort zone just ever so slightly. So what you didn't think you could do before has now become part of your comfort zone. So now what you do is you take that bit where your comfort zone is here, now you stretch it a little bit more. And the same thing happens. And then eventually, you stretch it a little bit more until you get to your goal. And that is what, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but that is what we call, the growth mindset. And it's always wanting to continue to grow and learn how to apply that, not just in your personal life, but in your business life, in your leadership role. And I think that it is essential for any leader to master that skill, because how can you ask your team to do something if you're not prepared to do it yourself? And therefore, like I mentioned, it's by practicing this and doing this every day, and it's even just taking something very minuscule that you might think is a huge thing to you, and to others it's not a big thing, but maybe it is to you. Just like I said about the 24-inch box jump, doesn't sound like a lot, right? But because of the trauma, it was a lot. And so therefore, once you prove to yourself that you can do something, it's very easy to show others how you can do that. But you've got to master that skill yourself. And like I said, with elasticity, it's a huge tool to have. And if you can practice that every day, you are literally rewiring your neural pathways, and you're making that into your unconscious versus just having it as what we call the conscious competence. And then you're able to just open up your mind. You can stretch past that comfort zone again and again and again, and just keep expanding it. And then going back to what Phillip was saying about the empathizing, and what Dr. T said, you are empathizing with others too, because now you can kind of feel like you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes, because you understand what it's like for them to get past that comfort zone. So if you have a team member that's really struggling to get to a specific goal, maybe, there's something holding them back, whether it's, at work or in their personal life, you as a leader can now address that, and the tools of what to teach them to help them get past that. I just will tell you this, that a fixed mindset can definitely sabotage your thoughts, because it's going to just constantly keep telling you this is, if you've got that fixed mindset, you're telling yourself that you can't get any further. And so by having that growth mindset and just keep stretching and just practice it little by little by little, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. And don't think of yourself as this glass vase like a lot of people will do, because it's fragile. You think it's rigid and solid, but it's fragile. And if you drop that, it cracks. And therefore, think of yourself more as an elastic band. You're going to stretch it and stretch it. It can always bounce back. But now, like I said, you just expanded it past the original comfort zone. So yeah, elasticity is absolutely huge in my world, and what I do as a leader, and to help teach and educate many, many others, by enhancing their leadership performance. It's really a vital and critical tool to have, and knowing when to bring that out with your team.
Well, I think you just gave all of us and the listeners a PhD in elasticity. It was brilliant. I'm going to use a term from England. Brilliant. It was brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. T.
It was. I mean, John's heard me speak about this so much: elasticity and neuroplasticity and tissue change, especially working in the injury space. And it's such a powerful thing. And it takes consistency to create that permanent change. It can't just be, when I feel like it. And that's the other thing. It's got to be, regardless of if you feel like it, as you've shown in your life, like, you just got to do it. And that action, if you take that action on these self-care tools that we share with you today, and you're going to learn a lot more at the Buffalo conference, right? If you take action on those, that'll create the motivation and the change that you need. And if you ever feel bored on a Friday night, just look up stress strain curve of tissue, right? Like, of any tissue. It could be bone, connective tissue, brain tissue. I mean, it's fascinating-ish if you like reading science, but honestly, you could just listen to Laura, and it's way more fascinating listening to her talk about it. But change is possible. And if you are someone with a fixed mindset out there, like, no, that doesn't apply to me, you're wrong. You're wrong, because it can. And so, and she beautifully explained the path of basically neuroeducation. It's little steps. And I'm 6'1", Laura, and I had a hard time with 24-inch box jumps, and I've shinned my shins, and they're still there. I still have the scars to prove it, but they've healed, and I'm working back the courage too, right? It's little by little. And that was a great example, a real life example. Fall down and you get back up, but getting back up might mean baby steps, right? So, to kind of wrap things up here, everyone, because it's 2:30 Mountain Time, and we want to make sure we honor your guys' time listening. The love principles, right? Think about how you would apply those in your life. Lead you first. What does that look like for you? How can you start to do that more in your day? Oxygen. How can you be a little bit more thoughtful about your breath? Maybe taking a little timer on your phone and putting a timer to taking breath breaks, or being more thoughtful about when you meditate and breathe. When you meditate, the breathing that you are doing. Are you breathing more horizontally or more vertically? When you're on your phone, are you breathing more horizontally, 360 degrees, or are you kind of just doing this type of number? I'm over exaggerating a bit. Vulnerability. How can you have some of those vulnerable conversations with those you love or who you feel are empathetic people? Maybe there's some forgiveness or some conversations that you need to have to just help move forward in your life, right? What does that look like for you? And then lastly, we just spoke about elasticity. Where do you feel stuck or fixed in your life, whether it's with an injury, physical or emotional, or like literally just stuck in a decision that you're dealing with, or a pattern of thinking? Well, remember, change can happen, and how are you going to get through that? So, I would challenge all of you. We've got this Buffalo Leadership Conference in the Springs, July 21st at the Glen Erie Castle. Beautiful spot. We've got an early bird special. You can give a thumbs up, if this even interests you, or comment below. Yeah, it interests me. We'd love to have a conversation with you. But it is going to be a special event where the 5 of us will be there, and we've got a couple epic panelist speakers coming in. And do we want to announce that? I know I already gave away Gretchen Evans, the recent Pat Tillman Award winner and Command Sergeant Major of the Army. Amazing woman, Team Unbroken. But John, you want to announce the other one?
Yeah, John Register is our other panelist. John Register is a veteran, former Olympian and Paralympian, and amputee. Just an incredible guy with incredible stories of overcoming adversity and pushing through challenges and obstacles. So definitely fits into this Buffalo conference and the group that we've got together so far. So very much looking forward to that panel as well.
All right, awesome. And thank you, 5 of you, for sharing what you did. This is just the start, obviously. We've got another video series coming out here, but stay tuned. Check out what each of us have got going. Check out the Buffalo Conference and reach out to us if you have questions, right? And apply these love principles. It's the big one. Apply them. And if they make a difference in your life, then what else is possible? If you want to learn more tools like this, we'd love to work with you on July 21st.